Racism unfolded in a luxury restaurant when a waiter humiliated a black billionaire in front of an elite crowd. The waiter thought his cruel mockery would go unnoticed, but the billionaire's unexpected response left everyone in shock and taught the entire room a lesson they'll never forget. The Grand Royale, a restaurant nestled in the heart of the city, was known for its opulence. Chandeliers dripping with crystals illuminated every corner, and soft classical music filled the air. It was the kind of place where the wealthy dined to flaunt their status, a stage for power and prestige. Among the elite that evening was Marcus Taylor, a black billionaire known for his trailblazing success in the tech industry. Marcus wasn't just wealthy, he was self-made, a man who rose from humble beginnings to build an empire. Clad in an impeccably tailored navy suit, he exuded confidence and grace as he entered the restaurant. Heads turned as Marcus walked in. Some admired him, others whispered behind their wine glasses, speculating on how someone like him, black, in a space traditionally dominated by white elites, had reached such heights. Marcus, however, was used to the stares and the whispers. He had faced prejudice his entire life, and tonight he just wanted to enjoy a quiet dinner. As Marcus was escorted to his reserved table, the waiter, a sharply dressed man named Eric, approached with a thin, practiced smile. Eric's demeanor was polite, but barely concealed disdain lingered in his eyes. Marcus noticed it immediately. The subtle coldness in Eric's tone, the slight hesitation as he pulled out the chair. "Good evening," Eric said, his voice flat. "May I start you off with a drink?" Marcus nodded, choosing to ignore the undercurrent of disrespect. "A glass of your finest Cabernet Sauvignon, please." As Eric walked away, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The air around him felt heavy, and though he tried to focus on the menu, he couldn't ignore the occasional sideways glances from nearby tables. When Eric returned with the wine, he set the glass down with an audible clink, just a touch harder than necessary. Marcus's sharp eyes met Eric's, but the waiter quickly looked away, feigning nonchalance. "What would you recommend for dinner?" Marcus asked, keeping his tone polite despite the tension. Eric smirked, his professionalism slipping for just a moment. "Perhaps the chicken, sir. I hear it pairs well with your kind." The words hit Marcus like a slap. Time seemed to freeze as the subtle hum of the restaurant faded into silence in his mind. He stared at Eric, his expression calm, but his heart pounding. Around him, a few diners exchanged glances, some smirking, others pretending not to notice. Marcus took a slow breath, his hand steady as he lifted the wineglass to his lips. "Is that so?" he said softly, his voice betraying none of the fire building inside him. Eric shrugged, a smug look creeping onto his face. "Just a suggestion, sir." In that moment, Marcus decided he wasn't going to let the insult pass. He had dealt with countless moments like this in his life, but tonight, he would ensure this one was remembered, not just by Eric, but by everyone in the room. The tension in the restaurant was palpable. Marcus set his glass down and leaned back in his chair, a quiet determination in his eyes. He knew exactly how he would respond, and it was going to leave everyone stunned. The silence between Marcus and Eric stretched, heavy and suffocating, as the insult hung in the air. The nearby diners shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to intervene or continue their charade of ignorance. Marcus didn't need anyone to step in. He had faced far worse and come out stronger. He reached into his pocket and retrieved his phone, his calm demeanor masking the storm brewing inside. Slowly, deliberately, he tapped the screen a few times, as if searching for something important. Eric stood stiffly by the table, his smug expression wavering as he noticed other diners glancing at him. Marcus let out a quiet laugh, a sound devoid of humor. "A comment," he repeated. "Interesting. You see, I've spent my life navigating comments like yours. Subtle, sometimes not so subtle. They're meant to remind me of where you think I belong." The waiter hesitated before nodding. "Yes, sir." Marcus leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking onto Eric's. "Do you always speak to your guests this way, or is this just for me?" Eric shifted uncomfortably, but his pride refused to let him apologize. "I didn't mean any offense, sir. It was just a comment." The question hit Eric like a lightning bolt. His confident facade cracked, and his gaze darted toward the kitchen doors. "Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding," he stammered. Marcus raised a hand, silencing him. Oh, there's no misunderstanding. You made yourself perfectly clear. He took another sip of wine, savoring the moment as the tension in the room thickened. Then Marcus stood. His commanding presence seemed to grow, drawing the attention of the entire restaurant. Excuse me, everyone, he said, his deep voice cutting through the soft hum of conversation. I'd like to ask you all something. The room fell silent as diners turned their heads toward him. Eric looked like he wanted to disappear, his face pale and his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Marcus gestured toward Eric. How many of you have ever been judged not by your character, your achievements, or your humanity, but by something as arbitrary as the color of your skin? The silence that followed was deafening. A few diners lowered their eyes, shame flickering across their faces. Others shifted uncomfortably, clearly grappling with their own complicity in the moment. This man, Marcus said, his voice steady, thought it was appropriate to humiliate me for his own amusement. But let me be clear, I didn't come here for a lecture on where I belong. I came here for a meal, like everyone else. A ripple of whispers spread through the room. Eric's expression had gone from smug to terrified, his lips parting as though to speak, but no words came out. Marcus held up a hand, signaling for silence. And while I could let this slide, I believe in accountability. So, Eric, why don't we call your manager over? I think they'd be very interested in hearing about your comment. Eric's face turned a deep shade of red, and he stammered, Sir, please, But Marcus was already walking toward the front desk, phone in hand, poised to escalate the matter. He wasn't just standing up for himself, he was making a point that would ripple far beyond this room. As Marcus reached the manager's desk, the doors to the private dining area opened, and someone unexpected stepped out. A figure whose presence would change the course of the evening and leave the entire restaurant in stunned silence. As Marcus approached the manager's desk, the quiet murmurs in the restaurant grew louder. Diners leaned in closer, captivated by the unfolding drama. But just as Marcus was about to speak to the manager, the doors to the private dining area swung open with a soft whoosh. Out stepped a tall man with silver-streaked hair, dressed in a crisp white chef's coat embroidered with golden lettering. His confident stride and commanding presence left no doubt. This was the head chef and owner of the Grand Royal, Philippe Laurent. Philippe scanned the room with sharp eyes, taking in the hushed atmosphere and the tense posture of his staff. His gaze landed on Marcus, who stood poised and dignified, and then shifted to Eric, who looked like he was rooted to the spot. Is there a problem here? Philippe's rich French accent cut through the air, silencing the whispers. The manager stiffened, his posture suddenly rigid. Chef Laurent, Marcus turned to face Philippe, his expression calm but resolute. Chef Laurent, your waiter decided to educate me on what meal he thinks is appropriate for my kind. I'd call that a problem, wouldn't you? Gasps rippled through the room, and Philippe's jaw tightened. His reputation as a no-nonsense leader was well known, and his piercing gaze shifted to Eric, who was now visibly trembling. Eric, Philippe said, his voice low but dangerously steady. Is this true? Eric stammered, his words tripping over each other in desperation. Chef, I didn't mean... It was just a joke. A misunderstanding. Philippe's eyes narrowed, his face hardening. A misunderstanding. No, Eric, this is a disgrace. A man like Monsieur Taylor does not need to prove he belongs here, or anywhere. Do you have any idea who you're speaking to? The room collectively held its breath as Philippe turned back to Marcus. Monsieur Taylor, he said, bowing slightly. My sincerest apologies for this appalling behavior. I assure you, this is not what the Grand Royal stands for. Marcus nodded, his calm demeanor unbroken. I appreciate that, Chef Laurent, but I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to address what happened so it doesn't happen again, to anyone. Philippe straightened, understanding the weight of Marcus's words. He glanced at the manager, who quickly moved toward Eric. You're done here, the manager said coldly. No, please, I need this job, Eric pleaded, his voice cracking. Philippe raised a hand to silence him. Eric, you had a choice: to treat every guest with respect, regardless of who they are. You failed. Pack your things and leave. As Eric was escorted out, Marcus turned back to Philippe. Chef Laurent, I appreciate your swift action, but I think there's still an opportunity to make this moment count. Philippe tilted his head, intrigued. What do you have in mind, Monsieur Taylor? Marcus smiled slightly, the first sign of warmth breaking through his composed exterior. Join me for a meal. Let's have an honest conversation about what it means to create spaces that welcome everyone. Because change doesn't start with firing one person. It starts with leadership. Philippe's face softened, and he nodded. I would be honored. As Philippe led Marcus to the private dining area, the diners who had silently watched the scene began to murmur among themselves, some clearly reflecting on their own actions. But just as Marcus and Philippe sat down, a surprising phone call came through, one that would take the evening's events to an even larger stage. Marcus and Philippe sat at an elegant table in the private dining room, the air charged with a mix of tension and curiosity. Outside, the restaurant buzzed with whispered conversations as diners tried to process the spectacle they had just witnessed. A server discreetly placed a glass of wine in front of Marcus and a sparkling water for Philippe. Monsieur Taylor, Philippe began, his tone measured but earnest. I must admit, as much as I try to instill respect and inclusivity in my staff, tonight has shown me that there's still much work to do. Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful. Acknowledging that is a start, Chef Laurent. But fostering true change requires more than policies. It takes leadership that stands firm in the face of uncomfortable truths. Before Philippe could respond, Marcus's phone vibrated on the table. Glancing at the screen, he saw a familiar name. Alexis Grant, a prominent journalist and close friend. He hesitated for a moment before answering. Alexis, Marcus said, his voice steady. I hope this is good news. Her voice was calm but sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. Marcus, I just got a call from someone who was at the restaurant tonight. They said a waiter insulted you, and you handled it with incredible dignity. Is it true? Marcus leaned back in his chair, glancing at Philippe, who was listening intently. It's true, Alexis, but what's more important is what comes next. Alexis's tone shifted, a mix of concern and determination. This isn't just a story, Marcus. It's a moment. People need to hear about this, not for sensationalism, but to show the world what leadership and resilience look like. Marcus took a deep breath. He had always been cautious about using his public platform, but he knew Alexis was right. This wasn't just about him, it was about confronting a pervasive issue head-on. All right, Alexis, Marcus said, his voice firm. You can share the story, but on one condition. The focus stays on the lesson, not the man. This isn't about me. It's about the systemic issues that allow moments like this to happen. You've got it, Alexis replied, her voice brimming with respect. I'll make sure it's handled right. As Marcus ended the call, Philippe leaned forward. Monsieur Taylor, if there's any way I can support this effort, please let me know. Tonight has opened my eyes in a way I didn't expect. Marcus smiled faintly. You can start by using your platform, Chef Laurent. Your restaurant is a symbol of excellence, and your voice carries weight. People need to see that inclusivity isn't just the right thing to do, it's the foundation of true excellence. Philippe nodded solemnly. Consider it done. Moments later, Philippe stepped out of the private dining room, addressing the restaurant's patrons. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice firm, what happened tonight was unacceptable, but it has also given us an opportunity to reflect. As of tomorrow, every member of my staff will undergo mandatory training on respect and inclusivity, and I invite you all to hold us accountable. But as Philippe's words rang out, Marcus's phone vibrated again. This time, the notification on the screen stopped him in his tracks. Alexis had posted the story online, and it was already going viral. The Grand Royale was no longer just a luxury restaurant. It had become the epicenter of a nationwide conversation. By the time Marcus and Philippe emerged from the private dining room, the restaurant was buzzing with energy. Diners were glued to their phones, and whispers of the incident swirled in the air like an electric current. Marcus glanced at his phone, where Alexis's post had already amassed thousands of comments and shares. The headline read, "Billionaire confronts racism in luxury restaurant, a lesson for us all." The story captured the essence of the night: the waiter's blatant insult, Marcus's composed response, and the swift accountability from Chef Laurent. Philippe stopped in the middle of the room, his voice calm but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to personally apologize for what happened tonight. This restaurant has always prided itself on excellence, but tonight, we fell short. That's on me." The room fell silent as Philippe continued. "Starting tomorrow, we will not only implement mandatory training for all staff, but we will also partner with organizations dedicated to promoting equity and inclusivity in the workplace. We owe that to our staff, our guests, and our community." A smattering of applause broke out, growing louder as more diners joined in. Marcus stood off to the side, his expression thoughtful. He wasn't one for public displays, but seeing the moment resonate with so many people gave him a quiet sense of accomplishment. As Philippe returned to Marcus's side, his face was solemn. "Monsieur Taylor, I hope this is only the beginning of a much-needed change." Marcus nodded. "Change doesn't happen overnight, Chef Laurent, but it starts with moments like these, moments where accountability is met with action." Suddenly a woman approached the two men, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Mr. Taylor," she said, her voice trembling, "I just wanted to thank you. My son works in hospitality, and he's faced discrimination so many times. Seeing you stand up tonight gives me hope that things can get better." Marcus smiled warmly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's people like your son who inspire me to keep going. Thank you for sharing that with me." The night didn't end when Marcus left the restaurant. By the next morning, the story had made headlines across major news outlets. Social media buzzed with conversations about racism, accountability, and the power of standing up for what's right. Marcus's inbox overflowed with messages of support, and Philippe's public apology was lauded as a bold move in an industry often hesitant to address such issues. But for Marcus, the night was more than a viral moment. It was a reminder of the responsibility that came with his success. Sitting in his office the next day, he began drafting plans for a new initiative, a program to provide training and resources for restaurants and businesses to create inclusive workplaces. Weeks later, Marcus returned to the Grand Royal. The atmosphere was different, warmer, more welcoming. Philippe greeted him personally, introducing him to the staff, many of whom had undergone the new training. As Marcus enjoyed his meal, a young waiter approached him nervously. "Mr. Taylor," he said, "I just wanted to say thank you. What you did that night changed everything for us here." Marcus smiled. "It wasn't just me," he replied. "It was everyone willing to listen, reflect, and take action. Change doesn't come from one person, it comes from all of us." The camera fades out on Marcus, sitting calmly at the table, a quiet beacon of dignity and perseverance in a world still learning how to be better.